Mike, where were you when you found out Jimmy Carter died?
Okay. Where was I? I believe I was turning off the PlayStation that I got my children for Christmas, and I tried to put on the news to try to chase them out of the TV room.
Did it work? Did they, or were they enthralled? Were they like, Daddy,
No, they were
Papa, who is this man? I must know
They were
his
gone.
legacy.
They were gone. I think like for anyone born, for anyone born after 2010, like Jimmy Carter is like, I mean, he's part of like ancient history. He's like the kind of person you would expect to see only on a coin.
I honestly did not know Jimmy Carter was still alive until all that stuff about him endorsing Kamala Harris came out, and they like took him on a picnic or something, and there were these photos of him and his family,
Yes.
and it was just, I don't even know how to explain it. He already looked dead.
Yeah, I mean, well, in President Carter's defense, he kind of got lumped into the whole narrative about Democrats in general, just that they're all geriatric, like that they can barely move and things like that. And this poor man had served so long ago and just happened to be a strong person who survived for a long time.
Welcome back to Posting Through It. We've got some new theme music, and we've got a new co-host here, Mike Hayden. Introduce yourself to the nice people.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? Introduce myself. Longtime investigative reporter, focused on mostly radical right figures and sort of the movement. And by that, I mean, people who are preoccupied by the Great Replacement theory, but a reporter on a lot of things before that. I just finished working on the first draft of a book that I'll be filing in January. And I've been off social media since last year at this time. So this is like, I feel like I'm being thrown directly into cold water.
I'm glad you're joining me in this reboot. It's been, I guess, about a year and a half since I kind of put the show on hiatus. I just was kind of hitting the wall, and, with various things going on in my life, just kind of refocused myself for a bit. You and I were talking, and it kind of, I just kind of was getting this feeling that it was about time for the show to come back. It seems to have left the podcasting ecosystem, and nothing really seemed to totally fill its place. But more importantly, I am just hoping it's going to be a show where we can sort of talk about our, mortal modernity, as it will, in a little bit more detail, or maybe on a bit of a deeper level, because I get these increasing frustration, I guess, of, it seems like news media and political punditry and whatever you want to call it, it has this habit of getting stuck in the last major event that happened around the radical right or extremism or internet poison or whatever you want to call it. And, the big one was the Capitol riot. So everything that happens is like in the frame of if 2020 is going to happen again. And a lot has changed since 2020. That was true a year after the Capitol riot. It's especially true now, 4 years after the Capitol riot. And, if you want a job done well, you got to do it yourself, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think like the reason why I wanted to get into podcasting now is because it's not that we won't continue to do investigative reporting. I mean, I plan to get back into it as soon as I file my book, although not with SPLC. You know, one thing that is lacking is is coherent analysis of this moment. You see too many people, really, like you said, like focusing on events that have already happened, and I think that the eeriest thing about the moments after Trump's election was how quiet it seemed culturally. That everybody was just like, "Oh yes, that's right, he won," and this is ascendant, and these people are, they broke through. And I think that sounds just because, like you said, everybody was replaying the last, the last war, right? They're all focused on the stuff that had already happened in Charlottesville, and then focused on the stuff that happened on January 6th. And when you are talking about issues, not just reporting on them, it gives you an opportunity to kind of spring loose new thoughts, new ways of looking at events that are happening that you can't do with reporting. And that's what I was hoping to do here. I want to get a better understanding of what's happening, because even I feel to some degree overwhelmed by Trump's victory and what looks like in the United States a complete collapse of liberalism.
I mean, speaking of that cultural silence, I think it's really evident in how Democrats have responded. And, I don't want this to be like a partisan show necessarily, right? This isn't like the rah-rah Democrats hour. But, some of the post-game analysis, for lack of a better word, if this was ESPN and Trump just handily won the election, you've got people up there, former Harris campaign surrogates, saying, it was the perfect campaign, this kind of thing has happened all over the globe. And it's just sort of this feeling of, well, there was just kind of nothing we could really do about it. And this treatment of it as a type of inevitability, which it has been really, for me at least, disheartening to see play out. And I think in response to some of that, or maybe, just in juxtaposition to it, you're seeing a lot of sort of what I've seen called obeying in advance, which I think is a tad dramatic, but,
right.
ABC News settled out a defamation lawsuit the Trump campaign brought because George Stephanopoulos said that Trump was found liable for rape, which he was liable for sexual abuse, which is different legally. I think the effect on the general public when they hear that is about the same, but they paid out $15 million. All these criminal cases against Trump, are pretty much over and sort of being tossed in the waste bin. I think it's easy to feel disheartened because all the bad things we know, not just about Trump as a person, but the movement that he is an avatar for, are still true. But he, perhaps predictably got away with all of it, and it seems like one of his first things he's going to do is to pardon all the January 6 rioters. He's promising mass deportation. You've got people like Elon Musk and David Sachs and all these weird tech right-wing bros like, salivating at the prospect of looting the government. And you've got, the Laura Loomers of the world high on their horse, closer to power than they ever should be and probably personally ever dreamed of being, right? And
sure. And I just want to interject and all of the people who's, in the Laura Loomer mold, the people like Alex Jones and people whose lives have been teetering on the brink due to legal action or whatever else, all those people are hoping or anticipating for reprieve, better days ahead, because the Candyman is in office and they're hoping for, free reign. The other people like that we think of is like, there's Stuart Rhodes and like all these type of guys. They're all going to come out, if Trump pardons them, and we are going to be looking at a culture that is much more permissive of fascist street gangs.
Yeah, in vigilante violence, you can already see it with the way that the Trump campaign has championed the Daniel Penny case. For those who may not remember, Daniel Penny is the guy who choked out and ended up killing a homeless man on the New York City subway last year, who was recently acquitted. Very same kind of cultural energy as was present after Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted of shooting and killing people in the streets of Kenosha, Wisconsin.
It's not just in these cases acquittals, right? Like it's the celebration that is always that everybody finds most unnerving, right? Like it's not just like, okay, this was an ugly situation, he was acquitted, I thought he deserved to be let out. No, it's never like that. No. This guy here is he's the belle of the ball today. And that's what makes that's what's the stomach churning part of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like in the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, it's not like that was stupid, he shouldn't have been there, it's tragic that happened, but he shouldn't have been in jail. It is like, hell yes, we need more people like this. And that's the disturbing part. I think that's exactly right. But
100%. And you mentioned that capitulation, the stuff from ABC News, and that sort of thing. I think that the concern that I have here is twofold. Is one, yes, there's a chilling effect. People are scared to speak up, but I feel like there was also this feeling of having gone through Trump once, and this feeling that they were going to just get rid of Trump, and that everybody in journalism felt like that was their job when it wasn't their job to get rid of Trump, and and now they're exhausted and they're just washed, and they've just been pumping the same anti-Trump fluff over and over again, just grabbing headlines from everything he says, and now they're just dead inside, churning out the same stuff over and over again. And I know a lot of people who on the extremism beat and stuff like that feel like that sometimes, which is why I prefer much longer investigative reporting, so you can just focus on one important thing for 6 months. But I'm worried that that the sort of the hangover of covering Trump the first time around is out there, and the energy around breaking stories, because with all the bad reporting that came out of Trump won, and there was so much of it. There was a lot of great reporting too, and in a sort of depressed media environment where people are also scared to speak their minds, things could go downhill real fast. I mean, it could really, the environment feels ripe for corruption.
Yeah. Generally I've gotten this feeling, or I've been thinking about the reaction to Trump's election in 2016. You had this sort of cultural upheaval. People were shocked and outraged, and there were all sorts of people that sort of stepped up to be the champions of that moment. You had nonprofits, politicians, etc. A similar thing happened after the Capitol riot. So you kind of had that 2 election cycles in a row. But this time it doesn't feel, you're looking around the proverbial battlefield, and it doesn't seem like there's any gladiators that are coming to fight this new monster. Whether, just speaking from my experience in like the research nonprofit world, and also my experience in the media world, lawsuits, or the threats of lawsuits, internal struggles of organization, conflicts that donor money creates, and sometimes just good old-fashioned political expediency has, I think, confused a lot of places about what they should be doing right now, or scared them out of doing what they might otherwise if they had, a blank check and a ticket to ride. So it does. I think all of that is kind of contributing to what you mentioned earlier, which is this sort of cultural silence that happened after Trump won this time. And it almost feels like there's not really a plan. I don't know. I don't mean to be like too cynical about it, but it's
no. I think in there, and essentially what we're talking about here in this is just an intro podcast. We're just talking about our why to do a podcast now in this moment. This sort of nonprofit background that we both have, I've seen how badly they have performed down the stretch of the Biden administration, the final days of that. And you look at ADL essentially congratulated Trump. I have a lot of feelings about ADL, and particularly the way they've handled the situation in Palestine, obviously. But I mean, I thought that was egregious. I mean, how can you possibly, with a clear heart, approach donors and say, hey, we're going after far right extremism, and at the same time kind of congratulate Trump. And then the second, you look at something like SPLC, Hannah is still there and she's wonderful. But she's a researcher by title, and there are no more investigative reporters by title, as far as I know, at SPLC. That whole unit was shut down, and the editor, with which I worked, Rachel Yannick, who is brilliant and just an excellent person, they moved her into the communications department. And if you look at Hate Watch and what they were doing, I mean, we were doing a lot of stories about the different people who had not been identified, and et cetera in the movement. If you look at Hate Watch now, most of what they do is kind of roundups about events that they would have knowledge about, but not everybody would. But they haven't really produced many stories that you can look at or know anything about. You have groups like ACLU do their thing, but in general, that nonprofit space where you can kind of go after Trump without having to get clicks, which has always been which has always been a challenging thing.
Right.
They haven't done anything down the stretch of this election, and I don't anticipate them to do much other than just go back to their regular donor base now. And it's bad. It's really bad out there.
Yeah, and this is extended into news media as well. I mean, a lot of sort of the mid-tier publications, which I think were sort of the sweet spot for this kind of reporting, either just don't exist or have completely hemorrhaged. And the reporters who do have full-time employment covering the radical right, it seems to be a dwindling number. It's sort of like a stable of freelancers now, and then a handful of people at major publications that have been lumped into like the national security desk or the political desk. And this is maybe something that they write about sometimes, but not the sole focus of their reporting efforts. And I think that's also kind of contributed to what I have felt has been sort of a stagnation in reporting on these movements. I mean, huge asterisk applies here. There have been plenty of great stories on the radical right over the last few years, but maybe it is rose-tinted glasses. But, when you and I were on the beat during the first Trump era, it felt like, there were a few dozen of us just regularly slinging them out, and it seemed to be having some kind of effect, at the very least, and
Sure.
for a lot of the knowledge base that the public operates on with this movement today was created in large part by that field of reporting. And now we're getting like national news outlets running scare stories about the fucking Proud Boys of all groups, right before Election Day. And as even though I'm researching it mostly behind the scenes these days in a nonprofit sort of like research setting, I'm just kind of scratching my head and wondering, it's just not meeting the moment. It even some of the more cutting edge reporting still feels like it's on a bit of a delay here.
And also the audience is inured to terms like white nationalist, white supremacist, fascist, etc. They're inured to it, and they've decided they don't care because they've heard it so much. And I understand where they're coming from, which is why I made a choice to kind of pull back from labels in writing my book altogether. But that's a different story. In terms of how things, have an effect on reporting has an effect on people. That's another part of it. But another one you missed, which is true, we did have a group of people who were reporting on regular time. We also had a very flawed platform called Twitter, which was a little bit closer, as scammy as it was and as filled as it was with extremists. And it absolutely was. People like to put rose-tinted glasses around that. It was a hellhole most of the time, but it was the your capacity to promote your work on it and make an impact that way was significantly better than it is now. Now you're in this situation which is deliberately slanted and is designed like Las Vegas to take your money and leave you feeling useless.
It definitely does not seem like the Democratic Party is up for the fight. At least initially, maybe they'll get their footing and figure something out. But the Republican Party has the trifecta. They have the Supreme Court for God knows how long. They have the Senate. They have the House. They have a lot of state houses, and they have the presidency, right? They have, what is in Republican circles often referred to as the mandate, right? Basically free will to just go for your agenda as hard as you want. And it seems like the Democrats' response so far has just been all over the place. I don't get a sense that the Democratic Party planned for his win. Ryan Broderick wrote this column in MSNBC I thought was pretty good, called "There is Nothing the Current Democratic Party Can Offer Trump Supporters." And he pointed out in this column that it seems like the answer that Democrats have come up with is that they just need to be kind of more Republican, right? They need to play to the center and get those swing voters, of which I'm sure like 23 exist in the whole country at the, for this election anyway. But it's like a failure to differentiate themselves in a meaningful, substantial way, or to articulate a vision that is like specific and idealized and not like cut with a million caveats and flip-flopping and wish-washing, and it's...
So I think the short thing of it for me then, and hearing all this from you and talking through this free form, is that we need a forum essentially to talk about what happens in a country where MAGA is a hegemony, where where MAGA is the dominant cultural ideology, because nobody has really prepared for that, I think, and we're all going to have to live through it in a very short amount of time, in a couple of weeks. That's essentially what I'm hearing, and that's the way I feel, is that we need a way to just sort through it. Not that there are any answers can be easily provided.
A lot has changed, even from the period in which I stopped doing this podcast to now, but let alone like from the Capitol riot to now, or Unite the Right from now, even though the avatar of this movement is the same. It's Trump. It's the game show host that became the president. Like, it's the same guy in office, but this moment is quite different. And the sooner we can catch the car, the sooner we can figure out where to go from there. And I don't think that this podcast is going to be able to provide all the answers. Like, we each have our own opinions, but we can't tell people how to feel or how to think about any of it. But what I'm hoping we can do is give people, at the very least, some information and like a place to think about these things in a little bit of a different way, a little bit like a GPS system, or at the very least, something to listen to while they are also terminally online posting through it.
Yeah. And although I'm I strive for objectivity, and I'm trying not to give voice to one ideology or another. I'm pretty strongly opposed.
I think that's pretty
to the things that are happening now. I'm pretty strongly.
It's pretty strongly opposed. I've studied the media landscape, and I think that means that for balance, I need to be the aggressively pro-Trump voice on this show.
Yeah, there's a lot of people trying to reach out to MAGA and see if they can be on their shows now. They've realized that that's where the action is.
Oh, God. Well, we won't be doing that.
They won't have me. They call the police when I show up. And I mean that literally. That's a story we can get into another date, but like the police called on me 2 times in 1 week in West Virginia this year.
It definitely sounds like a story maybe for our next episode, January 13th. Folks, thanks for tuning in. It feels good to be back. Mike, thanks for joining me on this reboot.
Nice to see you, and I'm so excited to be here.
We'll see you next week.